Well, welcome everybody to another reaction video. This one, unsurprisingly, is about footprints. Well, in that I don't know who this chap is. I've never seen his videos before. First time YouTube just decided of its own accord to recommend a video about footprints, and I did watch it through. It's kind of interesting. This chap's got 500,000 subscribers. I'll obviously link his channel below. This obviously is fair use. It's a reaction video, so hopefully he don't mind. And we're just gonna we will listen, and I will try not to over talk. It's obviously just the second time I've done this, so we'll try and kind of just see how it goes. So bear with me. But like I said, let's listen to what he's got to say, and we'll make some comments as we go.
This, my friends, is a ground sheet, also known as a ground fly and also known as a footprint. No matter what you call it, this is a very important piece of gear that pros carry with them every single time they go out on a backpacking trip with a tent. An inexperienced camper or backpacker may not use one of these with their tents, and that's because they simply do not know how they work or why you should use one. In this episode, I'm going over the reasons why experienced backpackers and campers, pros, use a ground sheet every single time with their tents.
Right, we'll just stop there while his thing plays. I mean, I've been camping for 10 plus years, and I've never used one, and I see absolutely no benefit whatsoever, of using one. So, it would be interesting to see what he comes up with, and we'll kind of go from there.
When it comes to camping and backpacking, most people purchase a tent to keep them safe and protected from the elements. And if you have ever purchased a tent before, you know that tents are expensive. They are an investment. Consider this, your average good quality tent can cost as much as $200. Mid-range tents run $200 to $500, with high-end tents being $800 to over $1,000. Because your shelter is so important and also so expensive, it's important to make sure to make that product last as long as possible. You need to take the steps that are required to prolong its lifespan. One of the easiest ways of protecting that investment is right here with a ground sheet. By the way, everybody, in this episode, I may refer to these as ground sheets, ground flies, or even footprints. All of the terms apply. Each is correct. Anyways, this item right here is what this episode is all about.
Okay, I'll just stop there. One thing that I have picked up on social media and things like that is that a lot of people, they seem to see, their shelters and tents as an investment. And yes, it is. But I think a lot of people seem to see them as something that they're going to buy and then potentially sell. And from that purpose, they want to use a ground sheet. So, I guess from that point of view, you may want to, protect the ground sheet, but I really still don't see, I just don't see it as necessary. And I must admit, I've never seen my shelters as investments. To me, there's something that I get because I want to use them, and whatever happens to them, happens to them basically. And I certainly don't ever sort of think, oh, I'm going to sell this on in 6 months or a year's time or 2 years time, therefore I need to protect the bottom. We will come to looking after the bottom, because looking after your backside, your bottom, because I kind of get, there are times when you may want to be cautious. Let's carry on.
I will be covering what they are, how to use them correctly, why they're important, and I'll be going over why the pros use them and the noobs don't. First things first, let's go over what a footprint is and what it does and why it's so important. So number one,
I don't have Patreon, but obviously don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit that notification button, and obviously leave a comment below. Try to watch the video to the very end, and that helps this channel, my channel, more than anything else. Carry on.
Right off the bat, protection. This is going to protect the bottom of your tent from whatever is on the ground. We're talking about the items and debris that you can see and the items and debris that you can't. Footprints will protect the bottom of the tent from abrasion. They will also protect from sharp pointy sticks, roots, broken glass, whatever it may be that's...
I don't think very many of us are going to be camping on broken glass or anything like that, but I guess it's possible if you're in somewhere in a city or a town or something like that, or a campsite where they've had raucous parties
on the ground. It might be a tiny little twig that you do not see that you put your tent down. As soon as you hop inside of that tent, it punches through the floor. Or maybe over a long period of time, you've set your tent up over and over on top of dirt, rocks, roots, limbs, and whatnot. That repetitive abrasion slowly removes the protective coating on your tent, or worse, actually puts a hole in your tent. You have to keep in mind...
I think it would take a lot of use before it actually rubbed through a ground sheet, especially the thicker Hillyberg ones and the thicker ones. Obviously, some of these newer tents, which we'll probably come on to later on, and the lightweight ones, they do use very, very thin ground sheets. I still don't think you need a footprint for that.
Everybody, when it comes to your tent, it's not the fabric that keeps the water out. It's the coatings on the fabric that keeps the water out of your tent. So if you don't use a ground sheet, you're exposing that material to the ground. You're exposing that coating to rocks and roots and sticks. Every single time that you go out, every time that you move around inside of your tent.
Okay, so what I would do, let's get to what I would do now, before you all turn off. What I would do is I always take a foam mat with me, like a Z-Lite, or a foam mat, like a sit mat, and with that I can be out camping, and if I want to stop and have a snack or a biscuit or a drink or whatever, I can put that on the ground, sit on it, and that doubles up as, and it's usually a roll mat or something like that. Put that under your ground sheet, and that will protect your ground sheet without having to carry the extra weight of a footprint.
That material is rubbing and it's wearing off that coating.
I guess if water does start to get through and it rubs off the coating, rather than taking a footprint with you or something like that, just simply retreat it in 2 or 3 or 5 years time when that starts happening. So rather than carrying something, look after it and then retreat it if it's necessary. I've never needed to retreat anything in 10 years. Obviously, depending on your footprint, you might have a Cuban fiber one that needs a little bit more care and protection, but obviously Cuban fiber can be stuck with tape if it tears or anything. So nylon type crank sheet, if you do put a tear in that, then you are a bit more stuck. So obviously on this type of terrain that he's got a picture of here, I would put my foam mat down first and then the ground sheet on top of the foam mat. You don't have to have a foam mat under the entire, I really just don't think it's necessary. Just put a foam mat under the bit where you'll be sitting, lying, leaning, and that type of thing. So a regular ground sheet, a regular foam mat just under the pressure points just gives protection. I don't think you need to necessarily protect the back part of the ground sheet or the inner at the back, because you're not really going to be putting any pressure on it. So I guess you might lean over to grab something, but the chances of you doing damage, I think, is quite slim. So I can understand protecting under where you are lying and pressure is on. A foam mat easily does that without a footprint.
Another huge benefit of using a ground sheet is that you're going to keep your shelter clean. You're protecting your tent from mud, from dirt, from pine needles, from sap. This is an important reason why I personally use a ground sheet with every single tent that I use. I'm doing my best to protect it and also to keep it clean, because when I take it home, when I'm drying it off, I don't want to have to wash the bottom of that tent. I want everything to be as smooth and as quick as possible. I want to set that tent up, I want to let it dry, I want to clean it out, and I want to put it up. I don't want to spend all day removing tree sap from the bottom of my tent, because having to clean that material can be a true nightmare.
I have to admit, when I bring my stuff back, I just dry it out and store it. I've very rarely had a dirty bottom, so that's really not a problem. I guess again, if you're in the forest or something and there's sap or something, I've comment below. Anyone ever had any problems from sap or anything like that? I mean, I've not heard that before, so that's an interesting one. Let's carry on.
Separating your tent from the dirt, from the debris, and so on. You're keeping your tent as fresh as possible. You're keeping it as new feeling as possible. And you're lessening the amount of maintenance that you have to do in the future. Point number 3 deals with site selection for your tent. You can easily take your ground sheet, throw it down on the ground, and you can determine whether or not your tent is going to fit inside of that space. That way you don't have to take your tent, set it up, only to discover, hey, something's not right. It's not going to fit. This goes back to making your life nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. But again, with that, I think after a little bit of experience, you can look at the ground and see what it's like. That might not be quite enough. What I tend to do is I might just do a walk backwards and forwards over the area, 6 feet backwards and forwards, just to see whether it feels flat under the foot, and then I aim I aim for my bed area to go there. You could lie on it if it was dry, to see what it was like, which I've done that before now. Or of course you could also just put your foam mat down. If you wanted to put your foam mat down, lie on that, make sure that it's flat and comfy, and then just remember where it is, or leave the foam mat there, maybe put something heavy on it just so it stays in place, and put your shelter over that. So I'm not saying don't put something under your ground sheet. That might very well be helpful and useful and protective. I'm just saying I don't think you need a footprint to cover the entire area.
And easy. You can spend less time fooling around with your gear and more time enjoying nature. This step may not sound that important to you, but it's going to save you a lot of time and frustration in the future, which is important. Next, everybody, when you use one of these ground sheets, you put them on the ground, you put your tent on top. This is going to lessen the amount of condensation that forms inside of your tent because you have that protective barrier on the ground.
Condensation is a very interesting topic. I know a lot of people on social media say that a footprint covering the entire floor area protects against condensation. I actually dispute that personally. Again, I'm sure it probably does help to a degree, but I really don't think it's necessary. I think just from cooking in the tent, I think from breathing in the tent, and I just think from, it's a tent, it's a shelter. And if you've got an open tarp or something like that, well, air's going to get in anyway. And I think just air in the atmosphere is going to get in. You've got vents open, you've maybe got a little bit of a space at the bottom of the ground, so air obviously is going to get in. You're not in a sealed bubble where no air can get in, so whatever air is in the atmosphere outside is going to get into the tent with you. Also, obviously, if you have a mid or a MLD trail star or an MLD pyramid shelter, and you've got a ground sheet or an inner which is at the back, then yes, you've got 50% of the ground already covered, 50% of the ground not covered. Generally with those shelters, I just haven't really had a problem with condensation on the ground. If you're in a tent or something like that, then you've got a little porch here, maybe 2 porches, 1 porch, something like that. It kind of depends how your tent is set up. If that's the case, probably 70 or 80% of your living area inside the entire tent is already covered, and you just have a small porch or a small strip of land, as it were, that is uncovered. I just don't think realistically that very much condensation will be reduced by covering that small area of land, because again, the air is in the atmosphere. And I don't think that when the air comes into your tent from outside, it's suddenly going to be very much less humidity in the air in the tent as outside. I've not measured it. I don't know. Maybe it's possible. Comment below. Can humidity be less inside the tent and then outside, I don't realistically see how that is possible. So I don't realistically go along with that one either. Also, I like grass to be able to put my dirty shoes on, put my stuff down. I like to have my cooking pot there. I use a methylated stove cook, so that goes on the ground. Therefore, if I had a footprint there, I'd be burning holes in it. Also, if I need to have a pee, I ain't going out of the shelter unless it's warm and dry, and I tend to pee in the port, so I can't necessarily go peeing on my footprint, can I? So there are many reasons not to use one. Obviously, if you use one, great. I just don't think they're necessary. I'd rather save the weight. Let's carry on.
It is separating your tent from the cold ground underneath, and also all of the moisture that may be in the soil or on the grass. Additionally, that ground sheet is going to separate your tent from the cold, wet dirt, grass, and so on, from the warm air on the inside of your tent. And again,
this is something else I have heard at least one person say, that a footprint adds warmth to your shelter. Again, if you've got air flowing in, you're not pitched right to the ground, you've still got the air coming in. I don't see, again, comment below, is it remotely possible that by putting a ground sheet, which is a thin sil nylon piece of material or something like that, is that remotely possible to make the tent very much warmer than outside? Maybe. I don't really go along. I don't see how, but interesting comments, interesting thoughts.
this is going to lessen condensation forming inside of your tent. Next, everybody, for cold weather,
I would rather, sorry to keep interrupting, I would rather have a warm sleeping bag, warm clothing, and everything that I need to keep me warm more than the inside of the tent. I think you should be warm enough in the tent yourself from what you're wearing, rather than relying on something like that may or may not work.
weather camping, this is going to be invaluable, and that's because it offers an additional layer of protection. It's a separation layer between your tent and the snow underneath. This is going to lessen the amount of cold air coming up through your tent, and at the same time, it's going to lower condensation. These are the reasons why pros use these every single time with their tent setups. Now let's talk about why noobs don't use them. Primarily, it's because of weight. They believe that using a footprint is going to add a substantial amount of weight to their loadout, and that's simply
It will add some weight. We're coming to an interesting thing here, and I know what he's going to say. MLD's coming up. MLD's coming up. Listen carefully, everybody.
not the case. There are plenty of ground sheets that are out on the market today that are extremely lightweight. For an example, this is a ground sheet made out of plastic that I purchased from Mountain Laurel Designs. It is extremely inexpensive. It's strong, it lasts a long time, and it is super, super light. This may look like it takes up quite a bit of space inside of my pack, but it doesn't. This is a very small item that can be easily compressed. It can be rolled up. How about that? It's about the size of a hot dog.
Yes, if you want extra protection to put things down on each side of you, maybe you've got a very narrow ground sheet, or you just want a little bit more space to put something so it's not on the ground, then something like that, obviously might be useful if your ground sheet isn't big enough. But if you have a big enough ground sheet, then that's plenty. You could even use that plastic thing as your ground sheet and not take a ground sheet, just take that. I've known people do that. So you could take that plastic stuff, use that and nothing else. It's maybe not quite long enough. The one that I have is a bit shorter than my blow up mat, but that's just something. Just so you could use that by itself without a ground sheet. Just use that as your ground sheet. I'm saying you don't need both.
Here's another example of a ground sheet that is ultra lightweight. It's made from sil nylon. It is very lightweight, takes up no space at all, and is very effective. What we have here is the more traditional ground sheet that you will find for most backpacking tents. As you all can see here, it's quite a bit larger. This is also quite a bit heavier than these two options here. Most tents do not come with a ground sheet, but some less expensive tents do. With those tents that do include a ground sheet, more than likely it will be like this. With the companies that do not include ground sheets, generally you can find a ground sheet that will fit your tent, and it will typically be just like this. Now everybody, I have some points to go over concerning ground sheets. Number one are the materials. You can find ground sheets in a wide range of materials: polyester, nylon, sil nylon, Dynama, plastic, Tyvek, so on and so forth. Which one do
And
you select?
PCF
Well, that
human
really is up to
fiber.
you. It really does depend on what you want to do and how much you want to spend. If you want something that's ultra light, you're going to be looking at Dynama, sil nylon, plastic. If you want something that's inexpensive, polyester. If you want something that's a little bit stronger, nylon. With polyester ground sheets, they tend to be inexpensive, but the weight goes up a little bit. Then you have nylon, a little bit more expensive, a little bit lighter, but stronger. With plastic ground sheets, they're inexpensive, not as strong, ultra light, and require
I think that was an MLD screenshot there. Ron, you're famous.
a little bit more care. For example, if you're going to use a piece of plastic as a ground sheet, you do need to take some time and clean up the site before you lay down that piece of plastic.
That's obviously common sense. I mean, always just make sure that where you're going to lie down, you know, it is free from as much debris as it is possible, you know, to do.
Make sure that there's no twigs, rocks, sticks, nothing like that. You do have to be gentle with it because it's a piece of plastic. With Tyvek, there are a few points that you need to consider. First off, it tends to be inexpensive. It can be loud though, it can be strong, and you have to use it the right way to prevent moisture from coming through it. With the other materials that we talked about already, they are waterproof. They will not allow any water to come through the materials, but that's not the case with Tyvek. You have to use it the right way. Those are the basic points to consider when it comes to materials. What I recommend is that you take some time and research the right material for you. That way you can make a really good decision. Again, it really does depend on the aspects and traits that you're looking for, plus how much you want to spend. For an example, how important is going like ultra light to you? Do you need something that's ultra light and also super strong? Or could you go with like a piece of plastic that's ultra light but somewhat delicate? Again, these are just points that you have to consider. You may be thinking to yourself that you don't need a ground sheet because you're going to set your tent up on very soft surfaces, such as grass, such as sand. Go back to the bench.
Yeah, let's stop that. I would bless him. I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're even ever going to watch this. I probably wouldn't call sand a soft surface compared to grass. Grass, yes, I would say is a soft surface. Sand, yeah, I would not be putting any ground sheet. Maybe a Hillyberg ground sheet I might do. But I think with a ground sheet, again, on sand, that's clearly a very, very abrasive surface. Again, I would just put my foam mat down first, put the ground sheet on top of that, you know, the inner on top of your foam mat. So you've just got some protection there, and then just, you know, and then just carry on with that. And again, I wouldn't bother worrying about the bits where you're not lying or sitting or moving around so much on the ground sheet, because you tend to be moving in one area. So if you specifically want to cover under the ground sheet, then just get a piece of that plastic, which is, you know, super cheap and easy, and cut it, which I think he's going to talk about in a minute. Although he's talking about cutting it to the size of the interior space of the shelter. You know, if you're really worried about your ground sheet, and then cut your footprint plastic or whatever to the size of your ground sheet, maybe 6 or 8 inches wider, just so you can put a couple of bits down or put your feet on when you're changing wet socks or sun the tent.
Benefits of using a ground sheet. First off, you're not only protecting the bottom of the tent from abrasion, but you're also keeping it clean. Something I want you all to consider here is that most tent companies make a ground sheet, a footprint for a tent that they're selling, and they're going to sell those for a premium price. At times, they can cost a quarter of the amount that the entire tent costs. That's ridiculous. These companies are going to sell these footprints for $40, $50, all the way up to.
I've also noticed that quite often they give them away free, which again I think is a marketing thing. We're going to give you a free footprint, and then everybody then thinks, oh, we've got to have a footprint. I don't know whether footprints were used in years gone by, but I've noticed they give them a free footprint, and then everybody thinks, well, you got to have a footprint, when you don't. I don't think you need to. Yeah, so then you get a free footprint and you think you're getting something for free, when they probably cost a few quid to make.
$80. I personally have never purchased a ground sheet that a company was selling because, one, they're very heavy, and two, they're very expensive. You can always find a lighter weight, stronger, and less expensive ground sheet on the open market. Aftermarket ground sheets, while they may not fit your tent perfectly, they can be tucked in and they're going to work just as well, if not better. And they're going to save you a lot of money. I just mentioned a very important point. When it comes to tents and the companies that make them and the footprints that they're selling specifically for those tents, those footprints are going to fit those tents perfectly. They're going to be perfectly shaped for the bottom of your tent. When it comes to aftermarket footprints, they're not going to fit your tent perfectly. The odds are you're going to have multiple inches of material sticking out from underneath your tent. That's where you take the material and simply tuck it in underneath your shelter. Or if it's not going to rain, you can use that extra material to kneel on. It makes a great surface right in front of the door.
Yes, if you put it just inside where you're sitting, it's handy just to get in and kneel on just a little bit there. And if you've got a tarp or something like that, like a cricket, MOD cricket or such, and you want a little bit by the door, then maybe again, just use your foam mat or have a bit of foam mat that you can just put there and kneel on.
Or that you can kneel on, you don't have to get your knees wet, and you can access your tent. If going ultralight is important, you can always cut down those aftermarket footprints to make them fit your tent perfectly. As you can see there, everybody, when it comes to footprints, you have a lot of options. You could spend a lot, you could spend a little. It really does depend, again, on what you're looking for. What's important to you? I personally use this piece of plastic that you see here for just about every single trip that I go on. It's lightweight, it's strong.
Check out the MOD website. Not that I know very much about MOD. I admit I don't know anything about MOD, but check them out.
Strong enough. It usually lasts me 2 or 3 years before I have to replace it, and once it has some holes in it, I can recycle it. Also, it should be mentioned that this is very easy to repair. All you have to do is just take a piece of tape, cover up the hole, and you're done. Talking about how to use your ground sheet, it is very simple. Look around the area that you're considering to camp in. Make sure to check the trees for widowmakers and old rotten limbs. Once you have a site selected, clean it up somewhat. Even if you're using a piece of nylon, a piece of polyester, or so on, clean it up, get all the rocks and sticks out of the way. And once you've done that, place the ground sheet on the ground. Then you grab your tent and you set it up on top. And just like that, you are protecting your investment. You're protecting the shelter that's going to protect you from the bugs and from the elements. This is what an experienced camper and backpacker will do every single time with their shelter, and what a noob won't do. As a pro tip for you all, some ground sheets have straps in the corners, maybe even buckles, some have grommets. You can use those connection points to make tarps out of these ground sheets. That means in an emergency situation, you can string one of these up as a tarp and it will protect you. Or you can use it as a wall. Let's say that you have a tarp overhead, you can use that ground sheet to make a makeshift wall. That's going to block wind.
So 1 minute you have to put the footprint under you to protect underneath, and then if the conditions are not so good, you then take that ground sheet, get your bottom dirty, scrape it, rub it, lose all your protective things so you can put it up on the side. Okay.
And also rain. In this episode, we've gone over the reasons why you should use a ground sheet with your tent every single time. It's the smart thing to do. It's going to make your life very, very simple. It's going to protect your investment. And when you get done from your adventure, you're going to have less cleanup to do. There's going to be less maintenance to do. There's no reason not to use a ground sheet.
I never have any maintenance. All I ever do is just come home, dry it out, store it. Again, I've never had a never had a dirty bottom yet. Sometimes you've got to be careful when there's cow, or well, not so much cow stuff, but sheep droppings and such like. But it's rarely a problem, and if it is, just wipe it off or chuck it under the shower
With your tent. And that's because ground sheets don't have to be expensive and they don't have to be heavy.
Just get a lightweight piece of plastic if necessary. And I've only ever used that because this last trip I needed a wider ground sheet, not a footprint. Again, I take foam mats with me every time because they're just used for sitting on. If your airbed fails, a foam mat is useful. So just use what you're already taking. You don't have to carry something else.
For this episode, everybody, I am done. Make sure to comment down below, share your thoughts. What do you all think about using a ground sheet with your tent? If for some reason that you refuse to use a ground sheet, make sure to comment down below and to share those reasons. I'm curious.
Or do a reaction video. He seems a really nice chap.
To hear them. For now, folks, I am done. Hit the like button before you go. It helps a lot. If you want to support the channel, you can do so. Patreon, YouTube, you can join the Wolf Pack. Also, make sure to check out my second YouTube channel, A Quiet Place Adventures. Just like on this channel, every single week there's a brand new adventure for you to enjoy. Everyone, take care. Be well.
I'll stop it here. He's obviously thanking his Patreons and supporters. Well, I've got 3 supporters now, so thank you very much for thank you very much to JJ for being one of the magnificents, and also thank you to Poop Deck and oh god, okay, trying to get my brain treasure. I've only got 3 and I can't even remember bloody 3. So JJ, thank you very much for being a magnificent, and Poop Deck and Organized Chaos, thank you very much for your support too, and especially everyone else. If you've got this far to the end and you've put a like and maybe a comment, you have helped the channel the absolute most simply by watching to the end. Thank you very much indeed. We were finished now. We don't need to. This is the end of the video now. So thank you very much indeed for watching, and yeah, we'll maybe if another one pops up or something like that, just as if YouTube recommends something or something like that, or if you know of a video and you think, oh, Tony might and I'd like to react to that, then let me know. Or if anything pops up, then I'll maybe do another reaction. See how this one goes. It's all fun. I don't know who this chap is, but he seems very nice. So thank you very much, whoever you are, for for being a good sport after the fact. All right. Until next time. Goodbye, everybody.